I don't know anyone else offhand who's ever had that kind of situation except the writers I just mentioned. That kind of writing. They are historical writers. They're writing history. Do you see what I'm leading to? They are historical writing of what's already happened. The facts are already accumulated. The details already exist. You may have to detail, you may have to dig out a few facts here and there. You may have to go to some archives. Go to libraries that people think do not have any information that would be worth having. And lo and behold, they have entire attics, entire basements and attics filled with documents that are priceless for what you are looking for. Priceless for your project, priceless for your messages, your book in the making, whatever. They are historical writers with all of this at their beck and call. I have all of this at my beck and call. I have immense amounts of resources, and I have all of my experiences, and I have all of the lunatic things that every kind of freak and psychopath imaginable has ever perpetrated and portrayed and played out for my amusement. Thinking, of course, that they were doing something entirely different. Well, I've sort of put that all together into a message, you see, which is coming at everybody. Lo and behold, I am writing history. As it's happening. That's very rare. It does happen. It happened in ancient Rome. It happened in ancient Greece. It's happening now. I am writing history. The actual history. And historians will debate this left and right and up and down for centuries, but is it possible that if you are in the vein of historical writing, the resources open up for you? The references come out of the woodworks for you. What you need presents itself to you, sometimes in such volumes that you become overwhelmed. Is this universally true of someone who writes history? Even someone who writes it as it happens. Does all of this stuff become available? Do you have this kind of sixth sense, this innate ability to find all of this, and it becomes simple for you? In a way, historical writing is easier than some other kinds of writing because to be good at it, you have to have this extra ability. This extra ability which unlocks the keys and unlocks the hidden treasures. Hidden treasures, the subterranean, buried, not apparent, even sometimes camouflaged resources and in unexpected places. Like you have a magic touch. Like you have a magic willpower. Things that have somehow metamorphosized or grown coverages, so they do not appear to be what they really are at all, suddenly reveal themselves to you, suddenly make themselves known to you, and are of very high quality and very important to you, if you are an historical writer. Otherwise, I'm not sure that happens. But is it possible, and historical writers will have to debate this for a long time, is it possible that this happens to all real, true historical writers? It's happening to me, and it's been happening for decades. For decades, I've had this magic touch, this innate ability, this sixth sense, and a seventh sense, and an eighth, and a ninth, and a tenth. I've had all these extra abilities all this time because I'm in the very multidimensional mindset of writing it all down as history, remembering it all as history, passing it all along as lessons of history. I've always looked at it like the future needs to know just how insane this is. I've always looked at all of this war as a massive lesson for the future. So this will never happen again. Not ever. And that's possibly why the manifestations of this today are so grotesque, so absolutely bizarre and lunatic and just sick like you wouldn't believe. Sick like only people who live at this time could believe. And I've got to somehow pass on just how bad it was to the future without getting too explicit about it. I think one of the first things I say in this message is that what you read in this message is not as awful as it really is. These days, when you're reading a book, 400 pages is about as far as you can go in one linear progression. I've been thinking about that because I've been juggling with 3 bowling balls in the air at a time what to do about certain works that are coming up. And they're 2,800, 3,800 pages. How will they be presented? How will they be put together? Will they be divided? So on and so forth. I've come up with the answer. But in one work, 400 pages is about as far as you can go in a linear progression. Linear progression. You start at the beginning of a work, you start at the beginning of the book, and you read for 400 pages. And something is explained to you in detail for 400 pages. Like the fall of France in the beginning of World War II. It was complicated, it was crazy. It had immense lessons inside of it that are parallels to what's going on here in America. You read about all the insanity that happened when France fell in World War II, and you derive the lessons from that. You can instantly apply them to the 2 trash can parties here in America and all of this queer government in America. The similarities are shocking. But that's not what this audio is about. It's not about how shocking the similarities are. I'm just telling you, 400 pages is about as far as you can go in a linear progression. If it's really, really interesting, you might get 500 pages. 500 pages in one flow pattern, and then there's a major result at the end. If you read the life of Van Gogh, I think that's 600 pages. Yeah. I read this massive book about Vincent van Gogh. I think it was 600 pages, translated. And it was worth the entire trip. Because when you get to the last 50 pages, you find out what actually happened to Vincent van Gogh and how and why. And you've already got all the background. And suddenly you realize all the bullshit you've been fed about Vincent van Gogh was nothing but gibberish. He died for a completely different reason. That's worth 600 pages. and all the lessons that are imbued inside of, live inside of the history of Vincent van Gogh. All of those lessons apply to your life here in your own world. So in that case, 600 pages was worth it. But usually 400 pages is about it. So how do you write something that's over 1,000 pages and you don't put everybody to sleep? Believe me, nobody's going to sleep when they read this message. That's not going to be a problem. But we're getting into the genre, we're getting into the size and the volume of 1,000-page works and beyond. And believe me, I know exactly how to do it. We're not going to have a 1,000-page linear progression to some final synopsis, some final conclusion. Oh, hell no. We're going to have conclusions all the way along the line, baby. We're going to have all kinds of lessons all the way along, and it's sectionalized. Sections can stand on their own. You can take any of these sections and make a different book out of it. It's designed so that you don't have to read 1,000 or more pages to get the great impression or the great idea of everything. You're going to have so many ideas going on, you're not going to believe it. And all of that is sectionalized into manageable volumes, manageable amounts of pages. That's how you do it. That's how I am doing it. And it's been done that way before in a variety of ways. But let me give you one example. One example. I love examples. One example, England in the 18th and 19th centuries, and all of those famous English writers that you've never heard about because you were raised in NEA, APA, ACLU, big business asshole, public and political schools, which have never had any intention of educating children, and have always had the intention of non-education and branding and programming, child branding and child programming. Well, you've never heard of the writers I'm talking about because you went to one of those political schools. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, there was a large group of English writers from England and a few Americans who were fabulous writers. I mean, fabulous. Great writers. And I've read most of what they've written. Just sensational, without being sensational. Sensational as in, oh, I'm not jumping up and down saying, this is sensational, this is sensational. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm looking back at it as a unit, as a work, and I'm saying, that was very impressive. That was magnificent. It was actually sensational. No jumping jacks, no running around the house in my tennis shoes. It's something quite different. I look back at a work that I've finished and I say, that was magnificent, that was sensational. This book I've just read about the fall of France in 1941. Very, very good book. Very illuminating, surprising. I'm not going to take bits and pieces out of it and use it for purposes of examples. Some of you just said, thank God. But I don't need that. I have so much of my own original material. I do not need to take anything from anybody. But I'll certainly put in a website link, if I can find one, to that book and the other 4 books that I've read already. Maybe the one I'm reading right now. Some of the ones you just wouldn't understand, but I'll put them in there anyway, because you need to broaden your horizons in reading. So there were all these writers in England and in America in the 18th and the 19th centuries, and they wanted to write big things. They wanted to write big works. Take Edgar Rice Burroughs for an example. Great author. Fantastic. These days, no one's ever heard of him. But Edgar Rice Burroughs could write like you just wouldn't believe. Fantastic writing. Incredible imagination. Became very, very popular. Hugely popular in his own life, in his own time. Now, almost unheard of, except for some of the works that he left behind him. Well, he wanted to write very large works, and so did a lot of other English writers. But there was this problem of mass marketing. There was this problem of what could people read? What would people pay for? I do not have that particular problem because nobody pays for what I write. So I have completely eliminated that problem from the get-go. No one pays for what I write. I may never charge anything for what I write. I've been dallying around with the idea of charging in the future for some of my complete novels, but I'm not sure if I will do that. I'm not even sure how to do it. Well, they came up with an idea in the 18th and 19th centuries in England and in America of what was called serialization. Serialization. It caught on big with the magazines of the time, and magazines began to take a work that was 20 chapters and put 1 chapter in each month of their magazine. So for 20 months, they had a guaranteed readership because people wanted to read the entire book, but it wasn't available as a complete book until later. It first came out serialized, 1 chapter at a time, in the monthly editions of such and such magazine, which was the only way you could read it. And it guaranteed the editors and the owners of the magazines a repeat customer readership. That worked for some people, but not for others. Some writers just did not like it. They wanted their works put out in larger quantities, and they didn't feel good about leading the public along like that. They didn't agree with the enormous greed that printers have. Another reason why I do not have my works printed by a publishing company is because publishing companies are notorious for being greedy bastards and bitches. Greedy bastards and bitches. Did I mention? Greedy bastards and bitches. Publishing companies. Greedy bastards and bitches. Do I need to repeat that? Well, what developed, to make a long story short, because a lot of things happened. A lot of different manipulations happened. There were a lot of behind closed doors arguments between writers and publishers. Some writers started their own publishing companies. Some writers published their own works. But one of the stable products, one of the solid results from all of that was called the 3-volume novel. The 3-volume novel. Think of 1,200 pages. 1,200 pages of something. I just explained in a linear progression, you really shouldn't go over 400 pages unless you've absolutely got a fantastic product. Unless you've really got a sensational, incredible work. And you need 500 pages, or you need 600 pages, and you've got some special ability to be able to help your readers get through all of that. You've got to help them through it. If you don't have that, 400 pages is about as far as you want to go in a linear progression. Well, guess what 3 times 400 is? 1,200 pages. So if you're a writer of a novel, a work, think in terms of a work. Not necessarily a novel. Because now you're getting into the reality that a novel can be smaller than a work. You hear me talking about and you hear me writing about a work all the time. Well, a novel can be smaller than a work. And what they determined back there in the 19th century was that one of the best ways to do this, and is the most amenable to human brains, is to create a work that's about 1,200 pages and divide it into 3 novels. Divide it into 3 novels. 400 pages, 400 pages, and 400 pages. And write it that way. So now you've got 3 complete works that are complete unto themselves, but they lead into each other. You're not forcing the readership to slog through 1,200 pages of something. Look at J.R.R. Tolkien. That was 4 books, actually. The Hobbit, and then 3 books of The Lord of the Rings. He used a 4-novel sequence. He knew all about this. He knew exactly what I'm talking about. And he wrote it that way because it had been determined and realized, discovered, that this works. This really works. I've got a writing on the board that's 5 novels, a 5-novel sequence. And I'm still wondering if I'm going to do it that way. I mean, it worked for Edgar Rice Burroughs. He could do 10 novels of the Martian series, and you would just eat them up. Because each of the 10 was great, really good on its own work, and it led to others and others and others. I don't know how many Tarzan books he wrote, probably 20, maybe more than 20. Probably 10 were made into movies. And each of the 10 novels, or 20 novels, of the Tarzan series was its own work, its own book, its own novel. Technically, the bigger work was the entire Tarzan series. Who knows? I don't know offhand how many books it was. Maybe 30, 25. But it would be a unit work. The Tarzan series, that's the work. The 20 novels are units of the work. His Martian series was 10 novels. The work was the Martian series, which has almost never been heard of. I think Queer Disney made a shitty movie about it and totally fucked it up, as usual. They kill everything they touch. But if you actually read the 10 novel work of the Martian series of Edgar Rice Burroughs, it's completely different and 1,000% better. So much better. But the point is, there's 10 novels, one work. Or 20 novels, one work. My problem is the size of an individual novel. One of the Tarzan books could have been maybe 150, 180 pages, 200 at the most, and then it's over. I have a hard time writing anything that's 200 pages or less. I hated writing all those small pages, all those small messages. Back in the years that ended last year, when I was writing in response to all of the insane filth of the queers and the politicians and the NEA, APA, ACLU, and all the sick white business assholes, when I was writing all of that responsive material to counter their lies, I was writing a lot of small works. And that was just terrible. That was like grinding my fingernails on a blackboard, or sticking my fingers in a meat grinder. It was just really, really bad. And wrong, because it was keeping me from writing something bigger, which you all need very much. That's the stuff that lasts. That's the stuff that remains. That is the work category that carries on and on and on and on. The smaller stuff, you'll have to put it together as a collection, or it just isn't going to survive. But staying on course here, what they determined in the 19th century about the 3-novel work had huge results, huge repercussions on all writers. Because it gives you a format that is very, very manageable. I hope there are human writers listening to this. You may see the video someday, and I don't think the video is worth watching anyway. And I'm sitting here drinking my tea. At least I shaved. And not that you would notice. And if all of these writers in the past have gone through all those trials and travails and pains and miseries to finally delineate that the 3-novel work is so standard and so important and so workable and so doable and so acceptable by the readership, think of what that means as a writer. Think of what it means. This is what I've been getting at all of this time. It's there. It's done. It's finished. The 3-novel format is pre-existing and it's proven. It's a proven format. It's there. It's waiting for me. It's waiting for you. And we haven't been getting there. We've been reacting to the queers, reacting to the deviates, reacting to the politician scum, reacting to the killers of the earth, reacting to the queer medias, all the lies. We've been reacting in the short term with short messages to all of these scum. But that format there, the 3-novel work, is waiting for all of us. And the way I write makes it even more important. And I've explained this in my writing. I write to